we think there are all kinds of things they're trying to do here. Wrong.
What will Florida do? This legislator with whom I spoke in Orlando on Saturday told me that you have to raise your taxes by $1 billion. Will you do that? Will the legislature of Florida actually extract $1 billion more from Floridians and spend it the way the feds tell them to? Will this actually happen?
Well, I personally, as a taxpayer, do not want to see that, and I suspect many taxpayers are going to tell the legislators they don't want to see that. But you have a chicken and an egg there. 27% of our state budget already goes to Medicaid. I don't know how many people realize it's that high in their states, but we've got other things like education, and we've got foster care and prisons to take care of, and we have about a $60 billion budget, excuse me, and this is going to be a serious problem for every single state. Are we going to raise taxes to do this? I think that's going to be a very difficult political decision in a state like Florida that has a balanced budget to decide to do that. You know, can you be required to do it? Does it, in effect, we can't just reject Medicaid at this point altogether as a practical matter. So that's part of the argument we're making in this court case.
Professor Barnett,
it's very impractical.
Got it. Professor Barnett, you know as well as anyone what the courts have let the Congress do under the Commerce Clause. Regulate wheat grown in a farmer's backyard that never leaves the farmer's property, so it's not commercial and it's not an interstate commerce. Regulate lawfully grown marijuana in a backyard. It's not never leaves the property, it's not commercial, and doesn't engage in interstate commerce. Question, do the courts have the institutional courage to say to the Congress, this is a line on the other side of which we won't let you go?
Well, the smart money is always that the court will uphold what Congress does. But in this case, if this bill turns out to be wildly unpopular, and in fact one or both houses of Congress flip parties as a result, and perhaps there's a repeal move in both houses that's vetoed or is subject to a filibuster in one house, I think the court may feel differently. It may have more courage to actually enforce a line in the Constitution. And remember, Judge, that this is something that that goes beyond the medical marijuana case where I was the lawyer for Angel Raich in the Supreme Court. This goes beyond that case. Never before in the history of the country has the Commerce Clause ever been used to mandate that a private citizen, just by virtue of being alive, has to enter into a commercial relationship with a private company. And anything that's never been done before lacks precedent. It means the Supreme Court has never directly validated this claim of power before, and if this bill turns out to be as unpopular or continues to be as unpopular as it has been, I think the Supreme Court just might have the courage of its convictions here.
The Congress acknowledges, John Tammany, that this is going to cost, I'm going to say, $1 trillion, $948 billion. What's a few billion here, a few billion there, the way these folks throw money around. But at the same time, they claim they're saving money. Now, can you even fathom their argument that by spending $1 trillion of taxpayer dollars, they're saving money?
Well, I think it's good politics, but we know that it's not going to happen. And what I like about what's happening right now with these companies writing down their earnings is this is the wake-up call to all the people that thought that a government that had no resources could basically give something out for free. It turns out to be that businesses are going to take big write-downs, which means they can't expand, they can't create jobs. Americans who want jobs will pay dearly for this health bill.
Professor Barnett, will the court preserve us from the tyranny of the majority? The president keeps saying we won the election. This is what they elected us to do. It's a policy decision for the legislative branch and not for the courts. But the whole purpose of an independent judiciary, I submit, is to protect us from the tyranny of the majority. Otherwise, nobody's liberty or property is secure.
Well, I agree with you about that, and I commend Attorney General McCollum for bringing this lawsuit, and I think the lawsuit has great merit. But I don't think that the American people who do not like this bill should put their faith in the courts to save them. I believe that political action of the kind that everybody's talking about is going to be necessary, and you just cannot count on the courts to do this. I would say people who oppose this bill should not count on the courts to save them, and people who support this bill should not be 100% sure that the court is going to uphold it.
General McCollum, are you confident that the court will interfere here, or do you think it is more likely that a Republican Congress elected in 2010 and maybe in 2012 and a Republican president in 2012 will get their hands on this before the courts do?
Well, of course, it's a lot simpler for the Congress to go and act and make changes in principle, but the fact is you've got to have potentially supermajority to go reverse this in the Senate at least, and we know that this is going to get to the Supreme Court in a couple of years, hopefully on an expedited path. And I'm very confident that our arguments are going to prevail at the end of the day. There may be a few bumps on the road here and there. There are a lot of technical issues here. But this is fundamental. This is one of the most fundamental cases ever brought before the Supreme Court or the courts of this country on the separation of powers and on the powers of the states that attorneys generals historically defend in smaller ways every day in our court system, the intrusion of the federal government. But this is far beyond anything ever done before. So I actually believe that at the end of the day, we're going to have a majority. We're going to have at least a 5-4 decision in our favor. But we got to get there first.
I got to tell you, I'm optimistic as well. And as someone who watches the Supreme Court for a living, I am very happy that you filed this litigation. Attorney General Bill McCollum, Professor Randy Barnett, John Tamny, thanks for joining us. 3 Navy SEALs accused of punching a terror suspect are still on trial. Why it would take only one signature to get that trial stopped. Next. Remember these horrible images? These are Iraqis cheering while the charred bodies of Blackwater security guards were hung from a bridge in the city of Fallujah back in 2004. 4 American civilian contractors were killed. The suspect behind the incident, one of Iraq's most wanted terrorists at the time, claims he was mistreated at the time of his arrest. Now the 3 Navy SEALs involved in the arrest are being court-martialed for their actions taken during the arrest. Actions many Americans argue should be rewarded instead of criminalized. Joining us now is Lieutenant General Tom McInerney. He's also a Fox News contributor. General, welcome to the Glenn Beck program.
Thanks for having me, Judge.
Here's what I've wanted to know. Somebody somewhere along the line made a decision to prosecute these guys. Somebody heard testimony, looked at a report, looked at evidence, and made a decision to prosecute them. Who made that decision, and what is that person's rank?
Well, I suspect it was General Cleveland's judge. It could have been the commanding officer of the SEALs. I'm not sure that was it. I don't know specifically, but in the final analysis, the one person that did make the decision was Major General Cleveland, who is in charge of the Special Operation Forces and Central Command. I suspect, Judge, that he relied greatly on his judge and legal counsel, which I have a problem with.
Okay, so you disagree, as do many of us, about the judgment made by General Cleveland. Question: did he have the discretion to go the other way? Did he have the authority from the government to look at this evidence and say, all things considered, I don't think these guys should be court-martialed for a bloody nose or a punch in the stomach?
Absolutely. I mean, I was talking to Randy Barnett before, who was in your previous segment, and as he stated in legalese, it was trivial if true. If it wasn't true, it was still trivial. It should never have gone to a general court-martial. I hold General Cleveland responsible for that, and I also hold his legal advisor. He could have done a number of things. He could have had a verbal reprimand, which I would have done,
right,
and you know, a good butt chewing, if they in fact were guilty. Number 2, he could have given them a letter of reprimand. Number 3, he took the worst course, which was to give them an Article 15, which they rejected, and that's why it's a general court-martial. Now, I would have given them the Silver Star because it was a brilliantly executed mission. There was not clearly, as we're seeing, enough evidence. The 5 people now are being given immunity, a whole host of things. I think today General Cleveland ought to say, look, this is trivial. Let's stop it.
Right.
And he has the authority to do that today, Judge.
General, here's what a lot of folks want to know, and I want this answer from you. Does the President of the United States of America, as the Commander-in-Chief, have the authority to sign a piece of paper and say these guys should not be prosecuted?
Well, he could do that, but I would, again, not recommend that. He could pardon them if, in fact, they were convicted. The way this case is going, I do not think they'll be convicted. There's a very high probability they will not. But as I say, the thing that could be done right now is General Cleveland ought to say, look, this is wrong with all this evidence coming in.
Understood.
I think this is wrong.
Can generals and people in command between General Cleveland and the President, Secretary Gates, General Petraeus, General Odierno, whoever was in charge at the time, do they have the authority to say this is just a wrong prosecution and it shouldn't take place?
Well, they could talk to them. Technically, they could take it away from General Cleveland. They'd have to take it away from him. We don't do that in the military. We let the man in charge do it. They could talk to him and they could make certain suggestions. But clearly, the only thing they could do if they wanted to change it, and General Cleveland did not want to do it, they could reassign General Cleveland, or in fact, they could take it away from General Cleveland.
Look, in the
if they, in
civilian
fact,
world,
thought he was
if a guy robs a bank, he's running out of the bank, and the police tackle him to stop him, and in the act of tackling him, he breaks his nose, we don't prosecute the police. Why are these guys being prosecuted?